The world is full of tours. But you don't choose a Toyota truck to follow the beaten path. You choose it to find the places in between. The detours, where each adventure pulls you toward the next. And wrong turns turn out right. So why would you ever take a tour when you could take a detour? Toyota Trucks.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Hey everybody, before we get into this week's episode, I want to let you know something. We're now ranked #1 in the categories of pets and animals and kids and family on Apple Podcasts. Now, pretty cool, huh? But I also know it couldn't have happened without you, the amazing listeners, and the amazing guests we've had on the show. So, most importantly, thank you so very, very much. Now, today's episode, a little nugget about me. I really just love puppy breath. How about you? I know it's kind of funky, but every time, and I mean every time, a puppy breathes in my face, well, you know if you know. Today, Vanessa Woods, she joins me. She's the #1 co-author of a New York Times bestseller and so much more. She studied the bonobos and everything dogs, including puppies. You know, those really cool puppy breath things? Anyways, her and her husband, Brian Hare, also started the Puppy Kindergarten. Now, you heard me right, a puppy kindergarten. Now, I'm always really amazed by smart people, and she's one of them, by the way, but they always think outside of the box. So, let's think outside of the box. In the service world, generally the attrition rate of being a service dog is really high. But what if you could find a better way to have more dogs make it all the way through to being a very needed service dog? Well, maybe a puppy kindergarten. Well, we're going to dive right in and see how a puppy kindergarten could possibly help. But even more cool, we all get to have a little bit of that puppy dog breath fix.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today my guest is Vanessa Woods. Vanessa, I'm so excited. I don't know that you're going to be because I've got a gazillion questions for you, but I can't wait.
No, I love questions. Thanks for having me on the show, Mark.
Well, you may not like questions when I get done because you've done so much, and all of it I found so fascinating. There's so many. We actually have some paths that have crossed, so I'm really excited to talk to you about so many different things. It's going to be fun. Mm-hmm. But what I thought we would do, and typically what I do is I like to start about you. How you got to where you are now. I mean, I know you grew up in Australia, but let's talk about your love of animals and how you got there. I want to know your journey so everybody gets to know you, and then we can get into all the other stuff.
Sure. Well, I was just one of those kids. I grew up really loving animals, and I kind of related to animals better than I related to people. I had a dog growing up, just like a ton of kids, and I loved my dog so much. And it was just something about growing up in Australia. We always had like a lot of wildlife around, but my dog was just like super special to me. So, I sort of by accident just married one of the world's, first dog cognitive psychologists in this new way of studying dogs like we study kids. And it was just kind of luck that when I had this opportunity to get sort of deeper into this work, it it was just something that I really enjoyed.
Well, I want to go back in time, though. I want to go to the Congo and all that kind of stuff too. But one of the things I was thinking about, I know you're from Sydney. I've been up in the Blue Mountains and seen all the parrots and stuff up there. It's really cool.
I am like a crazy birder, and so we were just in Australia over the winter, and I mean, even in the middle of winter, there are so many birds. Like Australia does have crazy birds.
They do. It's really, really awesome. But let's go to the bonobos. Now, how did you get there? And I didn't tell you this when we had talked previously, but I've spent a lot of time in Africa myself, and I've actually been in the DRC.
Oh, wow. One of the few people, not many.
Yeah. I was in a town in Bunia, and I've been in a lot of conflict zones that you've probably been in. I do a lot of volunteer work in conflict zones, but I was in this town called Bunia, and it was crazy. And we snuck into the gold mines and the whole crazy stuff that's out there.
Oh, wow. Well, that was brave. I'm surprised you're still here.
Well, it's funny. The guy that I went with, they call him, he's passed away now. He's I guess he's a pastor. They called him Reverend, God, I can't remember pronounce his name, Madugo or something like that. And they call him the Oscar Schindler of the Congo. So he actually saved a lot of people, and he worked with all these orphanages. He's just a crazy guy. And he goes, hey, do you want to see the gold mines? And at this point, I'm not really sure what he means, but we go in this car and we go into these checkpoints where all the military and stuff were. And he's telling them that I'm a priest from some other country, and we went in, and I mean, on a different time I'll show you pictures, but it was something out of National Geographic. It was amazing and also scary at the same time. Yeah.
Wow.
Of course, we're off there. I told you. Here we go. But let's go to bonobos. I really want bonobos. Sorry. I want to talk about bonobos, how you got there, and I want to talk about the handshake and all that. There's so much I want to talk to you about. It's crazy.
Well, the bonobos, I'm going to sound like such a trad wife, but again, it was like Brian's thing. So my husband's Brian Hare, and he's like a cognitive psychologist, and he really thinks a lot about what animals think about. And, we got married, we were both around 27, and he's like, hey, there's this crazy species I want to study. And, I'd worked with chimpanzees before, and he's like, they only live in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I could really use your help because I don't speak French. And it's a French-speaking country. So, I was like 27, I really had nothing better to do, and I'm like, sure. And it ended up just being this life-changing experience. I didn't know what I didn't know before I went there, but bonobos are very special.
So tell me a little bit, and I know we're going to talk about dogs, but I want to talk about that because, I've done some stuff with the chimpanzees. I've actually been and seen the gorillas in Rwanda, which is one of the top five things I've ever done in my life. It was just, and you're only there, allowed an hour with them, but it was phenomenal time for me and just eye-opening and just, I don't know. I just tell everybody one of the best things they could ever do. When I was reading about the bonobos and that they're actually friendlier than the chimps and all that, I mean, just to kind of gloss over it, but tell me a little bit about it because I've never really talked to anybody about bonobos at all.
Well, I think the most important thing to know about bonobos is that every other great ape kills one another. So humans, so there's lethal aggression in, definitely humans. Chimpanzees, they have war, they kind of have hunting, they behave like gangs in some scenarios, even orangutans and gorillas. But chimpanzees and bonobos are interesting because they share 98.7% of our DNA. So they're really closely related to us. And so it's kind of like having two cousins that, they've come from different sides of the family, but you're equally closely related to them. And, while chimpanzees and humans are, I would argue, definitely for chimpanzees, you can go back and forth with humans, but chimpanzees, they're a male-dominated society. The top-ranking individual is always a male. Like I said, they have war. Sometimes they gang up on one another and kill each other in terrible ways. They beat their females, kill their infants. So, and they're wonderful. I love chimpanzees. They have all these other really soft sides to them. They definitely have emotions like love. It looks like they feel grief. So they're this sort of fascinating species that everybody's kind of, been really fixated on for the last 40 years because they so closely mirror ourselves. We can just learn a lot from the way we are by, looking at chimpanzees. And I would say that bonobos are what we learn of who we want to be. So, it's not that they're female dominated, but the most dominant individual in a bonobo group is always a female. And, it's not that they don't have any violence, but unlike chimpanzees who use violence and aggression to assert dominance and maintain control, bonobos really use it to keep the peace. So just to give you an example, there was I was at Lola one time. Lola, a bonobo, is the sanctuary where we work. And Mimi was there, and Mimi is this kind of like old, wrinkly bonobo. She's like, the boss of everybody. And then Tatanga, who was one of the big males, just got it in his head one day that he was going to act like a chimpanzee. And so he came up to her and he just, like, out of nowhere, just backhanded her across the face. And, in chimpanzees, this would have been very normal. Chimpanzees start beating females when they become adolescents. And, the first female they beat up is their mom, which as a mother of a teenage boy, I find very distressing. But, and so Tatanga goes up and he's backhands Mimi across the face, and she takes it like a champ. She just throws her head to one side, and she turns her head back very slowly and just looks at him. And then he starts to run because he knows, like, within 5 milliseconds that Mimi's 5 closest girlfriends are going to come and just beat the living daylights out of him. And they do. Like, they almost,
I love that.
They almost rip off his testicles. Like, so that's how serious it got. And he never did that ever again. So that's what I say when it's like this. It's not like bonobos are kind of like this hippie ape that don't have any violence, but they use aggression in a really different way to the way chimpanzees, and I would argue that we do.
Baboons are a little bit like that too. The females are the stronger one in the baboon thing too, isn't that? Am I wrong in that?
The difference with baboons is that the females, and also because you do have animal societies where females are dominant,
right,
like hyena societies, and then also some species of macaques, but the females are very masculinized, and by that I mean they're bigger than the males. And in the case of hyenas, they also have penises. So females have just kind of replaced the male, whereas bonobos are different. They're smaller than the males. They're about a third of their size. And, they're not hyper masculinized the way that we see some of these other animals are. They're females, but they know that where one male bonobo could overpower any one female bonobo, no male bonobo can overpower 5 females working together. And that is how they kind of maintain.
So I got to tell you, it sounds like my house. I have 2 daughters and a son. My son's the oldest. My 2 daughters are younger. My son was a pain in his ass. He's the greatest. He's got kids now. He's a great father, but he was a troublemaker. But man, you mess with one of my daughters, the other 2, both of them, they're on top of him, and he would get scared. I mean, they took over.
Yeah.
They go, you mess with us, you're going to pay for it. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, you know what? In the words of Taylor Swift, they don't start it, but they know how it ends.
Oh, we got a Swiftie on here now, too.
Oh, my God, hardcore.
Well, she's a sweetheart. So let's get to dogs. It's funny. I was thinking about some of the stuff that I was reading. Basically, the genius of dogs is similar to what you're just talking about. But let's get to the genius of dogs. I was thinking about, we were talking about them being more reasonable, because one of the things you guys said when I was doing some of my homework, it's really the kindness, not the aggression, that really makes a good society. So it's really interesting how you're talking about the bonobos, which is probably similar to what you were doing with the dogs, I'm guessing, if I guess slightly right.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you kind of like have all these things floating out there, like, dogs or wolves, or, the alpha dog, that whole concept. You're going to be dominant to your dog. But actually, when you look at dogs don't follow, like if you look at free-ranging dogs that live without human interference, dogs don't follow the most dominant individual. They follow the one that has the most friends, basically. They follow the friendliest one. And dogs are just this prime example, and they show the difference between dogs and wolves are a lot of the similarities between chimpanzees and bonobos. So, dogs are a lot more friendly than wolves. Wolves have like a lot of lethal aggression. Dogs do not. And, dogs, the big question is, why have we almost hunted every wolf to extinction, and yet dogs are arguably the most successful mammal on the planet besides us. I mean, they're everywhere. They're so successful as a species, and it's because they're friendly. They've worked their way into our families, into our hearts, in a way that no other species has been able to. So, by able to form these attachments and these bonds, and just being friendly, dogs are really the clear winner.
Well, I think that works when you look at the human side, really. I mean, the people they kind of go to the nicer people, right? At the end of the day, the people there, I mean, we need to teach our politicians a little bit about that, but I won't go any farther than that one.
Well, it is interesting because there's, being in an evolutionary anthropology department, and there's nothing much sexy about evolutionary anthropology, but we do have like a couple of real sticky ideas. And one of them is survival of the fittest, and that's the idea that the strong and the aggressive will thrive and that the weak will perish. But the problem with survival of the fittest, as it's imagined in popular imagination, is that fitness to Darwin and evolutionary biologists was only your ability to reproduce. It was never meant to go beyond that. But somewhere along the way, fitness became confused with physical fitness, and that's when everything started to go pear-shaped. So, friendliness is actually an excellent strategy if you're going to talk about your reproductive success. We see friendliness everywhere in nature, from, just pollinating insects and flowers to, these relationships between like these little cleaner fish and larger predatory fish. I mean, and penguins make it through the Antarctic winter just by hugging. So friendliness is everywhere in nature, and it's a really great strategy if you want to thrive. And so I would argue that the same is true for people.
You don't have to argue with me. I 100% agree. I really do. I do. I mean, it's just, it's funny. We're talking about a variety of different things and conflicts. I was in Ukraine in September, and I was at an enemy rescue, but I was also doing volunteer work. And some people know some English. Some people know some English, but most people don't. And they were asking me about me being there, and I use this term all the time, and this is not my pat myself on the back, but I found the reaction was really interesting. I said, well, I just think, kindness begets kindness, and that's how it works, and that's how and they all really took a pause and said, that's right. And I'm thinking maybe it was just a language barrier out of it, but I remember it really stood out to me. It's really what I've always believed, but regardless of that, it really is. I mean, kindness begets kindness at the end of the day.
It's really costly to be aggressive. It's costly to try and maintain your status as the most dominant individual if you are dominant through constant aggression and generating fear. I mean, it's not fun.
No, and I think you don't have to be dominant by aggression. You can still be kind, but you can be dominant through intelligence and a lot of other things, or deeds, or whatever that is, and really make that. And I guess that's my segue into, let's talk about dogs now, and how that kindness is. And that, I was when I was doing my homework, I was reading this stuff about, I guess it's your guys' theory is dogs, they grew along with us. We didn't train them. We all kind of grew together at the time. I guess I'm probably saying this wrong, but it seems to me that they weren't being domesticated. We're kind of domesticating with them along the time. Is that kind of what the theory is, or?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So we actually think that there has been 3 waves of domestication with dogs. The first wave, which you're talking about, is when, dogs, kind of like bonobos, underwent selection for friendliness. So there was a real advantage back in the Paleolithic if you were a dog, or, if you were one of these proto-dogs and you were attracted to humans, because Just like we do now, we make a lot of trash. And so back in those days, when humans were kind of like living in bands as hunter-gatherers, like we threw all that trash outside campsite. And not only that, we pooped a lot. And human poop, I don't know if you know this, has about the same protein content as chicken.
No.
We don't digest protein very well. Yeah, so it's kind of like a Cliff Bar. So, and at the same time, in this Paleolithic, we had hunted out every large carnivore, besides wolves and bears, which are omnivores. All of them, like all the main predator guild in Ice Age Europe, were gone. So the saber-toothed tigers, the cave lions, the giant hyenas, like we'd hunted all of them to extinction. And you can imagine, so, if you were a dog wanting to get some Cliff Bars from the humans, if you were aggressive in any way, you would be killed. And so it was only really the dogs who were sort of like attracted to humans and who could make themselves really non-aggressive that survived and flourished in this trash heap we were leaving outside. And so that is what we mean by selection on friendliness, and that is what we mean by fitness, because the dogs who were able to occupy this ecological niche were just much more successful. So, and domestication, it's sort of like it's genetic change, genetic and behavioral change through generations. So, that would have been the first wave of domestications with dogs. And yeah, we didn't choose dogs. We didn't actively domesticate them. They domesticated themselves. And then the second wave of domestication would have been in the Victorian era, when we were just really heavily selecting. It's when all these dog breeds started to happen. So
hunting dogs and all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't even really know what genes were, but they knew. But there started this craze in England and then later in America, where they realized by intentionally breeding, they could breed dogs to look a certain way. And so it just must have been so fun. You could have a dog as big as a pony or a dog as small as a mouse. Like, they're just like playing with these. And that's when we got all the breeds that we have today. The 200 to 400 breeds, depending on who you listen to. So that's like kind of like the second wave of domestication. And then now, we argue that we're going through this third wave of domestication. And that is when, like, I don't know what your childhood was like, but with my childhood and my dog, we would just run around all day outside, like on the weekends, just roaming around. I was on the South Coast, so we just left in the morning, and nobody knew or cared where we were as long as we got back by dark.
Right.
And so it was just really this free range childhood and doghood, as it were. And that's why I love my dog so much. Like, we were best friends. Anyway, so in a generation, which is a really short amount of time to have this huge cultural shift, all of a sudden now my kids have a very different childhood, much more structured, much more regimented, a lot more parental involvement, and the same is true of our dogs. So now dogs, they depend on their parents their pet parents, to make sure they go to class, that they go to obedience class, that they're getting properly socialized, that they're eating the right food, that they're getting enough exercise. And so it's just sort of like followed this trend of child rearing. But what that's done is it's created this evolutionary mismatch where some dogs are fine with that, and they're really sort of like coping with this change of the deal that we have, because we never bred dogs to do this, to be part of our family. Well, we bred dogs for always.
Taking the dog out of the dog.
Yeah, the only thing we asked of dogs was that they protect the things, like all the way back to 40,000 years, what we wanted dogs to do was to protect the things and people we cared about. And that's basically what they were bred for. But now we want them to do entirely the opposite, which is basically like, I just hear people, their hopes and dreams and what they want with a life with their dog. They want them to sleep them under their desk all day while they work. They want to be able to take them on vacation. They want to be, able for them to like greet every person who comes to the door nice and calmly, but also in a friendly way.
Right.
And some dogs are fine with that. They are, kind of perfectly able to do this. And some dogs really struggle. And so that's why, we wrote our latest book, Puppy Kindergarten, was because we were studying a population of dogs who had already undergone this third wave of domestication and are perfectly able to fit into this cultural shift that we've undergone, and this population are service dogs.
Well, and I want to stand up, but I want to just address something. You know, I did an episode with the Free Ranging Dog Project out in Morocco.
Love those guys.
Oh, they're so sweet, and it's so interesting. And, you know, I asked them this the question, and I have my opinion, and I asked them, I said, so do you think those dogs in Morocco are happier than the dogs that are here living in my backyard, being what you're talking about, this new wave? I got my theory, because, you know, they go to the beach, they're like, oh, hey, what do you want to do today? I thought, let's go hang out at the beach. We'll eat that garbage over there, but that's fine. I think they don't live as long because they're not as healthy and they get hit by cars and stuff like that. But do you want 6 really quality years or 10 years of living in the backyard? And that's a real philosophical question, right?
Well, I mean, I think 6 years is kind of a stretch. If I remember the literature correctly, 95% of free-range dogs don't make it to 1 year old.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they have a really high rate of infant mortality. And if you've ever had a puppy, and we've raised 50 on Duke's campus, you will know that that sounds true. Because puppies, like babies, are always just going to freaking kill themselves. Like, they're eating poisonous plants, they're running into the road, they're chewing on electrical cables. They definitely,
So, but the question is, are they happier? Maybe in that year they're just happy as hell. They're as happy as dogs. They're living a dog's life versus living a dog-human life at some level. I guess it depends on how you look at it.
I think it really depends on sort of like, I don't think it's a question of which life is better, because you could sort of like say there's things about our lifestyle that, you know, living as hunter-gatherers, we had much lower rates of cardiovascular disease, we had lower rates of cancer, we had, you know, lower rates of all, respiratory problems that we have now due to urbanization and industrialization. But, you know, my son's got strep throat right now, and I am very happy for the invention of antibiotics. Right. And I think with dogs, it's the same. It's like, yeah, you know, they can go to the beach if they want to, but they're also full of intestinal parasites, probably, you know, may or may not have rabies and all sorts of other horrible things that can happen to you when you're not, when you don't have the appropriate medical care. So I think the question is not, are they happier like that or like this? I think the question is, now that we understand that there is a population of dog that's undergone this third wave of domestication, you know, these service dogs, how do we use that to inform making life better for all dogs? Right.
That makes sense. You know, the episode that came out this week for me was on the Chernobyl dogs. And for you guys, I bet it'd be pretty fascinating, because what's happening is that they have certain two different areas, but the dogs, their DNA is different than all the other dogs, because they're all staying in their specific area. They're being spayed and neutered. They're living long. Their lifespan early on was not as long because they didn't have the veterinary care that they're getting now, because there's a group, Clean Futures Fund, that's working with them. So they're doing spay and neuter. They're giving them shots, but these dogs are living their own life in the wild. And the only where the attrition comes from is really the weather and being the predators, the wolves and stuff like that. But they're living, these guys that were in this radiation multi-generations later, they're living 12 years, some of them. But, you know, they're living their own life too. There's something to be said about having their own life versus the human dog life, I think, at some level.
That'd be interesting to ask them.
Yeah, well, I've been there, but I like talking to people that actually know way more than me and see what they have to say. But
for real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back.
You hear that? That's not just a Toyota truck. That's the sound of no crowds, no alerts, no distractions, and no telling what you'll find next. You know, like a detour. So why would you ever take a tour when you could take a detour? Toyota trucks.
Anyone that has cats knows it's that darn litter box that can be an issue. And let's be honest, they smell really bad until now. Now, if you've got cats, Boxy Cat is your new best friend. You never have to smell that stinky litter box again. And let me tell you how. Boxy Pro, as in probiotics, stops the bacteria that causes the odors and never in to smell my litter box again? Hallelujah. Now, Boxy Pro keeps it odor-free infinitely. You still need to go scoop, but you never have to dump the box out again. You just got to top it off. There's no more switching brands all the time, and I know because my family uses Boxy Cat, and you should too. So get Boxy Cat at boxycat.com. That's BOXIECAT.com, and enjoy 30% off if you use the code for real. That's BOXIECAT.com/for-real, and let's get some fresh air back into your home. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
Let's talk about the I'm going to use Duke for now, but Duke Puppy Kindergarten. Tell me everything you're doing. I know you've got the book out and that, but let's talk about that because there's some really, what I was reading about it, I haven't read the book, but what I was reading some excerpts and stuff, it's really fascinating. And I have several questions about that, but let's talk about you, where you guys are doing. I know you get them like at 8 weeks old and they go for so long and all that. Let's talk about all that stuff.
Yeah, so basically we were an NIH-funded project, and the issue is there are millions of Americans that could do with a service dog,
right.
Who have various disabilities. There's no technology that can replace a service dog at the moment. Like you can get Alexa, whatever, to turn on your lights if you want to, and turn the music, make sure the door's locked, whatever. But there is no technology that can go find your keys from under a book, open the drawer, get you some water from the fridge, hand over your credit card, and do your laundry, and not only that, but give you a hug at the end of the day if you need one. So service dogs are really exceptional, and the issue with them is just the supply. So, it takes 2 years and $50,000 to raise each dog. And then at the 2-year point, half of them fail.
Right.
And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to develop this battery of cognitive tests where we could take like a puppy at, 10, 12 weeks of age, run them through this series of games. And just as you would with kids, see where they are in terms of their cognitive profile. And so we can predict with some amount of certainty, hey, this dog is going to definitely make it as a service dog. And this puppy over here is probably going to be a good pet. But even more than that, wouldn't it be amazing if it was more like a career aptitude test? So just because this dog wouldn't make it as a wheelchair assistance dog, maybe they'd make a great detection dog. Maybe they've got that drive. Maybe they've got the odor detection. Maybe this dog, isn't quite motivated enough to be a drug sniffing dog, but, they're so calm. Maybe they could really help kids in courtrooms. Maybe they'd be a great facility dog. So that was really the ultimate goal of the project. And so we tested 101 puppies.
101 Dalmatians. That's funny.
101. That's right. Yeah, we had to hit 101. I remember Brian saying, "Well, we're almost at 100," and I was like, "Oh, you got to get to 101 because that just sounds better." Yeah. Anyway, and so that was really, and in the process, we had these kind of 2 conditions because a lot of people put a lot of stock in how you raise a dog. It's kind of like the nature nurture sort of debate that we're always talking about with kids. And of course, with kids, we know it's not nature or nurture. It's always a combination of both. And so we tried to raise them in radically different conditions. So first we had all the puppies that were just raised in a normal family home, like service dog organizations usually do. And then we had the second group of puppies that we flooded with socialization. So these were the 50 puppies that we raised on Duke's campus, and they saw thousands of people. They saw people from all over, because we know with children, the more diverse groups of people they see when they're young, the more tolerant they are. When they get older, the better they are at flexibly solving cooperative problems. So we just really wondered whether this, was going to be a thing. And then also we had them being raised at the same time with other puppies of their same age. And this never happens for a very good reason. Like, nobody wants to do this because puppies are bananas.
Yeah.
12 weeks old, their teeth start to come in. Yes, all of it. But there was no research on what happens when you raise puppies with their siblings, because nobody else is dumb enough to do it. But there was some research that rats who were raised with their siblings were better able to solve cognitive problems like a maze. So, because we were so dumb, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. We're like, okay, we're going to do that. We're going to figure it out. Like, which raising, which method of rearing is going to be more successful. And so, and we tested the puppies every 2 weeks, from 8 weeks to 20 weeks old, which is their final period of rapid brain development, on these different sort of like these series of cognitive tests that we did to see what we could find out.
Well, give me an example of a couple of the tests.
So, yeah, they're basically just all the same tests that developmental psychologists use with children before kids can talk. So it'd be things like, you hide food under one of two cups, and then you point to where it is, and the puppy's got to figure out that your pointing gesture is a clue to help them solve the problem, which is something that even bonobos and chimpanzees can't do. And chimpanzees can usually run circles around dogs, but in this one they can't. They can't use a cooperative gesture to reach this shared common goal. Another one, which I think is really fun, is actually my favorite game, is that you just take, one of those little snap lock containers, the ones that got like latches, and you just put a piece of food in there, like you just put a treat in there, and the puppy kind of learns that they can open it. You kind of like leave it loose,
cool.
And then you do something really mean and you just like lock it.
Yeah.
And then you wait and see what the puppy does. And some puppies are like really determined. They're just gonna get that food out. They know they got it before. They don't need anyone. They're gonna solve this on their own. And there are some puppies that just like immediately sit down and just look at you and just like, hey, you just put it in there. Help me get it out. Like, you did this. You've got opposable thumbs. Like, fix this for me.
Yeah.
And it turns out that, because we often think of like intelligence as like a coffee cup that's more or less full. Like, you've got a smart dog or a dumb dog. But it turns out that like in this particular cognitive test, that the dogs who were really independent and kind of like tried to solve the problem themselves, they were much more likely to graduate as detector dogs, like bomb sniffing dogs. And the other puppies who were kind of like willing to just like sit and ask you for help, they were much more likely to graduate as assistance dogs. And so it's kind of like, it really goes along with what we're finding is that there's not one different type of intelligence, there's different types of intelligence, and they just mean different things. And just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're going to be good at everything else. And that they sort of like, just as we've learned in people, these different kinds of cognitive intelligence are independent from one another.
Personality traits. That's really interesting. I love this kind of stuff. I could talk to you about this for days on that. It's really interesting. So one of the things I'm curious about, different species probably are better than other species. Is that true of dogs? I mean, actually, I guess different kinds of dogs, like Doberman versus a Lab. Do you find that some are better suited for different skills, or is that not the case? Or is it just that?
Well, I guess two things. One is that, because we compare different species to another. Everyone's like, oh, what's the smartest animal? What is it?
Right.
And we always say that it's kind of like asking what's better, like a hammer or a screwdriver. And it really just depends on the problem you're trying to solve.
Right.
And so, it's kind of like the fish climbing a tree type type thing, where it's like, if you need to swim around and eat fish, then fins are going to do you much better than feathers, right? And so it's the same with cognitive intelligence. It's that, you know, different animals evolve to solve different problems, and so they're going to have the kind of cognitive profile that is most suited to the environment in which they evolved. And the thing about breeds is that we've studied tens of thousands of dogs of all different breeds. We have this game, this citizen science project called Cognition, where people can actually like test their dogs at home and play these same kind of games with them as we do. And so we've got like tens of thousands of dogs in the database. And what I can tell you is that it's not there are no breed differences, but we have not found them, because there's so much individual variability within a breed that it's difficult to see differences between breeds. And so that just means that you can have a Labrador retriever that acts more like a Doberman, or what you would think of a Doberman. You can have retrievers that don't retrieve. You know, you can have pit bulls that act like Labradors. Like, there's just no, and the same's it's the same for these kind of like different intelligences. Like, there's just no reliable statistical difference that we could find. And it doesn't mean that there are not differences, because certain breeds, like, they just you know, they have some things that are different, like, you know, border collies with the eyes, and then it turns out border collies sort of are the only breed that we know that can sort of like learn all these different words. But that is very rare, and it's not all border collies. Like, there's like 3 or 4 that have this kind of like word learning ability. So yeah.
So when you did the experiment and you had the puppies that grew up in the family environment, and then the ones that grew up in the lab environment, or you're together with siblings and that, were they more successful in doing these things? Did you find it? Because I'm just thinking about, from a human perspective, it depends on the environment you're brought up in, that your where your economic environment and all that kind of stuff too affects humans. What are you finding with the puppies? What different things affect them?
With the puppies, we can say that when it comes to like the cognitive games that we were playing, a Duke education made no difference. There was no difference between the puppies who were intensively raised on Duke's campus, who had endless amounts of structure and training and, you know, seeing thousands of people, lots of different people. Yeah. No different to puppies who are raised in a family home. And I think that's good, because it means that you do not need 100 undergraduates, several $1 million, and 5 years in order to successfully raise a puppy. Like, you just don't need to. But what we did find that was interesting is the dogs who were raised at Duke were a little bolder. We did find some temperament differences, and that just means that the Duke puppies were slightly more confident than puppies who were raised in a family home. But that was surprising to us.
So that's surprising to me too. So did you find that the Duke puppies, I like that term, by the way, the Duke puppies, because they were around so many other puppies, were maybe more or less aggressive because they were used to that? Or is that a learned trait, or is that an inherited trait?
I would say aggression is definitely an inherited trait, and that's what we mean by the third wave of domestication. Okay. In that, you know, service dogs are the population of dogs that perfectly fit into the lifestyle that we've acquired. And, you know, remember, domestication is selection on friendliness. That is the main difference between service dogs and pet dogs, is that they have had all aggression just completely bred out of them. Right. And, you know, you can even see this in their neurophysiology. Like, we have a collaborator, Evan McLean, and he found that service dogs have a higher level of circulating oxytocin than pet dogs. Oxytocin is kind of like the hug hormone that's involved in bonding between like mothers and their babies. So service dogs are very different because they've been selectively bred for temperament. And that is what Brian and I would argue that we need to do with our dogs now, is like, stop worrying about what your dog looks like. Like, all breed tells you, like, the only thing the breed of a dog will reliably tell you is what they're going to look like when they grow up. Like, everything about the dog, the personality, the temperament, the way they solve problems, I mean, that is just completely independently formed, which makes sense because we never bred dogs to be friendly to people, to be friendly to other dogs, to be really flexible and calm in kind of like arousing situations. Like, nobody does that except service dog organizations. And so, you know, this intense selection for friendliness has produced this population of dogs who are amazing. And, you know, if you've seen and worked and, you know, been around service dog, you will see that they are different. They are very different. They are exceptionally calm. They are super pro-social. Like, they are, you know, really happy to approach new people, new things. Not an aggressive bone in their body. And so, you know, that's what we argue is the future of dogs, is that we need to be really concentrating on temperament. And, you know, as for the dogs we have now, in the way that you kind of like raise and train them, it's like, yes, they definitely need to be socialized. You know, there's all the conventional wisdom is true, like socialized in a loving family home, it's totally enough. But some dogs come into this kind of situation that we've demanded of them very easily. Like, they're very well adapted and they're good with kids and good with the elderly. Yeah, they'll sit under your desk all day. You know, they don't need to go out all the time. They don't bark, they don't dig, they don't chase squirrels. You know, they're just built that way. But there are other dogs who are really having problems. And I think that, you know, we just have to be able to meet them where they are and understand that they did, like, we just changed the deal real fast on them, you know, and we never gave any thought to, you know, the way we were kind of like selecting and breeding dogs and the kind of dogs that we needed and expected. So I would say that is where a lot of the conflict comes between owners and their dogs, like expectations versus reality. It's just like kids. You know, like a lot of kids are fine with the structure, with the regiment, with hovering helicopter parents, with the intense pressure to get into college. Like, some kids are fine. And some kids are really freaking out.
Right.
And really having trouble and really, you know, and you just have to be kind and understanding and realize that this is a weird world we're in now. And, you know, meet it with some compassion and grace.
So let me ask you a question. So we're in the third wave. Is there the potential for, because it was a generation, which, as you said, is not that long, is there a potential for a fourth wave where you're creating, not creating, or I don't know what a good way of saying it, influence these dogs to be more social and adaptive? Do you think that's a possibility based on the way the world is now, or is it just are we at a wave that we're going to have for a long time, and eventually you're going to have these dogs that are more readily available to be service dogs versus the small numbers that you have now? I don't know if they're small, but smaller.
No, it is true. There's a very limited pool of service dogs. I think it's all part of the same wave. I think, you know, the first wave of domestication went on for like, you know, 5,000 years or so. So it's like, it's going to take a while. And I think the first step, like, we're only kind of waking up and acknowledging that there is this mismatch between, you know, what we've always asked of dogs and what we really need dogs for now. And it's kind of like, it goes along with a lot of other cultural shifts that have happened really fast, like urbanization, just kind of like these expanding urban centers, the fact that we all, you know, that in 2020, we kind of like shifted to this urban population rather than mostly a rural population. There's going to be a lot more urban density, a lot more living in apartments, you know, a lot less ability to, you know, I guess have the kind of childhoods and doghoods that we did and our dogs did when they were younger, and that's going to require some adaptation and some intentional selection and breeding.
So it's like you and I, we grew up in a free-ranging world.
Right.
We got to be outside, and most kids now are more inside than they're outside.
We've become definitely an indoor species. We spend 95% of our time indoors. So yeah, that's a huge shift. And, you know, the same is true of our dogs. So there's going to be some adaptation to that. And I think that, what service dogs can tell us that it is possible with a little intentionality to sort of like create this sort of new breed of dogs that is much more adapted to our lifestyles.
Intentionality, that's a good word. So I got a question for you, and you may not have the answer. And this is relating to my dog. I got a crazy dog, but she was a rescue, and I have a theory on this, but she was a rescue, and a litter of 8 puppies. The mother was killed by a car in front of her when she was about, they guess, somewhere around 6 or 7 weeks old. And she is really impulsive, and all of her siblings are very similar to that. And I always wonder, because, I've done some stuff, and obviously dogs, they're now, addressing the fact that dogs go through PTSD and that. I always wonder if part of her personality has to do with PTSD from experiencing that and losing their mother or not. I mean, it's a big question, obviously, but just curious of what your thought is on that.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's the same with all kind of like nature and nurture questions. It's like it's probably a little bit of both.
Right.
A lot of people go through similar things, early experiences of grief and loss. We
Right.
really, they affect people. I can tell you with bonobos, when they lose their moms really young, that definitely affects them. But then it's also, it's also your temperament, because you can have a lot of different people go through the same experience, and then
Right.
everyone reacts differently, right?
Yeah.
It's this is kind of like magic combination of your genes and your environment and your unique cognitive profile and unique temperamental profile that really makes you who you are. And I think the same is true for dogs.
I think I'm just trying to make excuses. That's why she's so crazy. It's definitely not her owner. It can't be her owner at all.
It's definitely not you.
No, it's definitely not me. So I know you've got something coming up. So what can people do to help you? Talk about, you guys have a bunch of books, obviously, but talk about what people can do to help support you guys. Do you guys need support? Let's talk about the book and that, just so everybody out there, and by the way, anybody listening, I'll have most of this stuff in the description, but let's talk about whatever we can do to talk about you guys.
Oh, Mark, that's so kind. Actually, we are raising funds right now for the Duke Puppy Kindergarten. Our NIH project finished, but it turns out that we're really looking at the effect that we had on the puppies. So, what effect would it have if we raised puppies, in contact with all these people? What we did not anticipate is the effect that the puppies would have on the entire Duke community. So we have, it's one of the largest undergraduate programs we had. And then, when we finished data collection and the 101 puppies had gone through, we kind of like shut down the kindergarten, and you could hear all the Duke students crying for them. So we would just have them like wandering up and down the hallways. And, so we kind of decided that, the world is very stressful right now. It's stressful for a lot of different people for a lot of different ways. And one way we could really help people in our small corner of the world is just to bring back the puppies. So if people are interested in learning more about our program and supporting our program, they can just go to Duke Puppy Kindergarten. Just Google Duke Puppy Kindergarten. The website will come up and there's a donate button there, and then they can make a tax-deductible donation to keep the project going.
Well, there's nothing better than puppy breath, in my opinion. I love puppy
breath. Except for when they eat their own poop.
What were you calling the human poop? Is
Cliff Bar.
Cliff Bar, yeah. When they eat the Cliff Bars. I think that's hilarious. That's a great way of calling it. I actually love that. Okay, anything else? Talk about your books and stuff where people can find everything too.
Yeah, definitely Puppy Kindergarten. I'm going to recommend something. I'd recommend Puppy Kindergarten because it's got a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of cute puppy pictures. And it's really kind of mostly what we've been talking about, this kind of like third wave and what people can learn about what the science can tell people about their own puppies as they develop, and their own dog, like when they were puppies. And then, if people don't have a dog, then I think the stories of the puppies that we raised are in themselves, like the puppies themselves are great characters. So, yes, I think for your audience, definitely Puppy Kindergarten.
Well, wait a minute. There's more. You're a prolific writer. Let's talk about your kids' books.
Oh, Yeah, they were, we've got books on, I've got books on like bugs and pirates and things. But you know what, the other book I would recommend if people are interested in this kind of like whole sort of survival of the friendliest is that book too. It's called Survival of the Friendliest, and it's the way we've applied basically our evolutionary theory to what makes friendliness so successful, not just in other species, but in our own.
Well, and again, for everybody that's listening, if you go to the description, all this information is going to be on there. And is there anything on social media that people can be following what you guys are doing, anything like that?
Duke Canine Cognition. There's puppy photos all the time. You know, we just had like one of our posts go viral. They had like 1.5 million views. It was it's a post of nothing. Like it's just like one of those memes that I don't know. The Duke kids run the social media, so I don't know what's going on half of the time. But they did have a couple of posts go pretty viral. So if people are done with doom scrolling and they just want puppies in their feed, it's the handle is at Duke Canine Cognition, and it's on Instagram.
You know, it's funny. It's social media is one of those things. It's necessary even when you have a media thing like mine. I absolutely hate it. I have a love-hate relationship with it. I love getting it out, but I hate having to be involved with it at all. It's just one of those torturous things for me. And you never know why it's going to go viral. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, it's completely random, as far as I can tell.
Okay, so we're done, and so now I'm going to torture you with a joke. For everybody that's listening, and I know you're cringing, and you've listened to me before, you know how bad these jokes are, and I'm going to be telling the joke. The funny thing is Vanessa's never holding the joke, so she doesn't realize how bad it's going to be. But as I always say to everybody, if your grandparents that are out listening, you want your grandkids on, nieces, nephews, your kids on, if you want, or you want to be on the show, if you email me at mkyle@forrealpodcast.com, I promise you the guests, probably more importantly than even me, would really appreciate you guys telling the jokes, and we'll put you on. So here's my joke. Grin and bear it. And I've got to look at it. I wrote it down because I'll forget. But anyways, the joke is, do you know, my dog is so smart, he actually likes to play fetch with me. You know why?
Why?
Because he has me throw the ball, then he tells me, you go get it. Anyway, I know, I told you.
Really bad joke, Miles.
I told you.
Like, Mark, it's not even funny.
I know.
I get but I get it. It's kind of funny because it's not funny.
Well, that's the whole point. Actually.
That's your thing.
Well, anyways, first off, Vanessa, thanks so much for being on the show. I really, as I told you, I knew there's so many other ways that I could go with this thing, but I really, really appreciate it. And it's always nice to meet somebody from down under.
No, it's a pleasure. Pleasure to be on. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. And then for everybody else that's listening, as I always say, without you guys, I don't get these great guests. The thing doesn't keep going. But you guys make the difference for it. And also, one last thing, too, is if you've got somebody you think that would be really a good guest on the show, please email me again at the email. But most importantly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much to everybody for listening for real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.
Recently, my dog Mabel was scratching, rubbing her ears, and shaking her head all the time. And I thought my allergies were bad. Now, did you know that dogs' allergies are up 30% in the last decade? Now, I found a solution. A friend of mine told me to try Better Wild Allergy Relief Chews. The change was, in one word, amazing. Now, my crazy dog Mabel is really, really happy, and guess what? So is her dad. Better Wild Allergy Supplement Chews has a special blend of wolf probiotics designed to make your dog's gut healthy, and the cool thing is, it supports long-term allergy relief. I so wish Mabel could tell you how much she loves Better Wild, because I sure do. Right now, Better Wild is offering listeners up to 40% off your order if you use betterwild.com/forreal. That's betterwild.com/forreal for up to 40% on your order. Remember, betterwild.com/forreal, and your dog is going to be happy as my dog, Mabel.